Hello, my name is Ilya Raskin, and today we're going to talk about plants and human health and this long-standing, intimate connection which people had with plants from the dawn of human civilization. When we talk about the history of plants and people, we should remember that plants, particularly land plants, appeared 500 million years ago. This is the time when they left the sea and conquered the land. And currently, there's close to 390,000 species of land plants spread on every continent. However, Homo sapiens, us people, have appeared only 250,000 years ago, so plants have been in existence much longer than we were. Animal life would be just impossible without plants. They're the only organisms can use solar energy to fix atmospheric CO2, combine it with water and some micro and macronutrients from soil, and form a vast array of proteins, amino acids, natural products, nucleic acid, everything which can compose their bodies. So we can only derive our energy by eating plants. So almost everything we eat started as plants. We eat plants directly as plant biomass, like salads, or we eat plants indirectly by eating animals which eat plants and therefore form the food chain which we benefit from. But today we're not going to talk about plants as our food. We'll talk about plants as a source of healing, a source of medications, pharmaceutical agents, dietary supplements, which people have relied on from the dawn of civilization. Why are we deriving so much healing power from plants, particularly historically? And this is because plants learn how to produce a vast array of what we call natural products, organic compounds, all of which have certain functions which is consistent with functioning of biological organisms. So those molecules which plant can make using, again, solar energy are optimized for biological function because they're there to perform certain function in plant bodies. Therefore, possibly by analogy, they can also help us to function better. In contrast to pharmaceutical agents, which we swallow as a pill, which contain mainly single compounds, plants evolutionary design their natural product to work together, to synergize each other's action, because that gives you, in many cases, much stronger effect, and in case of pathogens and diseases, blocks the development of resistance, because it's much harder to develop resistance for several compounds than for one compound, like antibiotics, and therefore we have so many drug-resistant bacteria now in our hospitals. And again, through evolution and through this continuous experiments in biosynthesis, plants have learned how to make vast array of chemically diverse natural products. And again, many of those function in our bodies as medicines. And this is what we're going to talk about today. In 1991, in the border between Austria and Italy, high in the mountains, a body of a man who lived 5,300 years ago was found and named Otzi. And when scientists studied his frozen body, they discovered that he had very few possessions. He had some tools, he had some weapons, but in addition to that, he carried a pouch. And this pouch contained a powder which now we know came from the fungi or fungus which grows on a birch tree. And this particular fungus is known to contain polyphoranic acid, which is a compound which can kill parasitic worms, helminths. And when scientists examined Otzi's body, they have actually discovered he had lots of parasitic worms in him. So it is very likely that this first man which we found frozen in the Alps, that he actually already knew about the healing power of plants, and he carried plant medication with him to cure the disease which he apparently had. It is important to mention that the roots of modern pharmaceutical industry directly come from plants and plant natural products. It's been known for a long time that willow bark and some other plants which contain a simple phenolic compound called salicylic acid can cure aches, pains, and fever. In 1838, the Italian chemist known, who was called Raphael Perea, actually isolated salicylic acid from the willow bark. But salicylic acid by itself is somewhat toxic to the digestive system. It causes ulceration and pains. So in 1899, Bayer, German, at that time there were no pharmaceutical companies, but soon it will become one of the largest pharmaceutical company, actually made a synthetic analog of plant salicylic acid called aspirin, which is just acetyl salicylic acid. And hence the modern pharmaceutical industry was born. And aspirin, for the last 120 years, is probably one of the, by far the most popular pharmaceutical agent available today and still widely used today for a variety of ailments. The slide which you see now lists some of the most important plant natural products which became human pharmaceuticals of today. Some of the actually most prescribed pharmaceuticals of today. And still, about 25% of all medications we buy from drugstores today are derived from plants. And we should remember that the total pharmaceutical market at 2018, for example, was $1.4 trillion. So the quarter of that market, world pharmaceutical market, actually is directly derived from plant natural products. Alkaloids probably represent the largest group of plant natural products which became medicines of today, from atropine to quinine to vinblastine and vincristine to anti-cancer agents. Terpenoids and steroids like artemisinin is certainly a very widely used pharmaceuticals of today, artemisinin for malaria. And then some phenolics and polyphenols also add to the pharmaceuticals derived from plants. Just because a lot of work in our laboratory is dedicated to metabolic syndrome and diabetes, it is important to mention metformin, probably one of the most commonly prescribed drug for diabetes, type 2 diabetes today. This also came from plants. It's been known for a long time that French lilac actually can reduce the sugar content of urine. Later, it became apparent that a group of compounds from French lilac called biguanides actually are responsible for this hyperglycemic activity of French lilac. And again, biguanides are quite toxic. So synthetic analogs were made in the 30s, in the 1930s, which actually became metformin, an incredibly successful life-saving drugs, which again owes its origin to plants. I have already mentioned artemisinin, a terpenoid which comes from Artemisia annua, a plant which has been known for a long time to actually treat malaria. But in 1972, a Chinese scientist, Tu Youyou, actually isolated an active ingredient of Artemisia annua, known today as artemisinin, and for this great contribution to human health, which saved millions and millions of lives, she received a Nobel Prize in 2015. And now, still, artemisinin is a first-line defense medication against malaria used around the world in combination with other antimalarial preparations to block the development of resistance. However, it is important to mention that today, because of the rapid progress of science and biopharmaceutical industry, single compound medications, whether they're natural products or synthetic organic molecules, are becoming somewhat less popular. The front line of medicine now is in biotherapeutics, known as biologics. That is by far the fastest growing sector of pharmaceutical industry, and some of this growth occurs at the expense of single molecule, organic compound, natural product-based medications. Those biotherapeutics include monoclonal antibodies, obviously vaccines, which is so important now because of our fight against COVID, recombinant hormones like insulin, other recombinant proteins, cell-based biologics, where actually we inject cells, modified cells in the human body to attack cancer, for example, or gene-based biologics, where actually we use genes. We try to modify the genetic code of human body so it can better resist and attack the diseases. But even here, plants play an important role because although this is outside the scope of this lecture, there's several scientists and there's several companies which actually work on making those biotherapeutics in plants. Plants are very easy to transform with foreign genes. Plants have been known to very effectively make human antibodies. They can make human recombinant proteins, and they're very fast to grow. So tons and tons of products can be actually grown inside of plants. And then plants can be harvested and the recombinant biologic extracted. So even in the area of biotherapeutics, plants may play a role, important role in the future. And while plant natural products may be losing its importance as prescription medications, the area of dietary supplements, particularly botanical dietary supplements, I think represents a major opportunity for growth. Herbal supplement market in 2019 was almost $7 billion, and it's continued to grow. And this is a market just in the US, which is about 40% of the total herbal supplement market worldwide. This diagram shows the different categories of botanical dietary supplements, different ailments which they intend to prevent, cure, energy, general health, bone, gastrointestinal health. What is happening right now is a very important trend, and the biggest growth in sales are being enjoyed by immunostimulating type botanicals because of the COVID and the necessity, perceived necessity among people to use herbal botanicals to strengthen the immune system, particularly those botanicals which have history of immunostimulation. One of the reasons why botanical dietary supplements are growing in popularity today is because, in contrast to conventional single ingredient pharmaceuticals, which, as I already mentioned, are losing grounds to biotherapeutic agents, botanical dietary supplements are complex extracts which contain many different natural products, plant-derived natural products, which actually can work together to achieve synergies in preventing and curing the diseases. And this is a very important property of dietary supplements. They are extracts, and the combination of molecules can be more effective therapeutically than in single molecules. Single molecules, like conventional chemotherapeutic agents for cancer or antibiotics for infectious diseases, are based on the single molecules. And single molecules are good in killing cells or pathogens. They're not good, however, in treating and preventing complex chronic diseases, which are very pleiotropic in their origin. Those are cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, autoimmune diseases, psychiatric diseases, Alzheimer's. And the combination of bioactives provided by botanical dietary supplements may actually provide a better strategy for dealing with those conditions than a single ingredient drug. Of course, as long as we add science to validation of those dietary supplements. And despite their high potential particularly in preventative medicine, dietary supplements and their development and their studies is complicated by a variety of challenges. Most importantly, it's sourcing and standardization. Where do we actually get the reliable supply of the plants which are being extracted to produce those botanical dietary supplements? And how do you make sure that there's a batch-to-batch consistency in every pill which is being produced? Because plants are notoriously varied in the composition of our natural products, depending on the time of the year, depending on the season, depending on the genotype. They're basically those chemical chameleons. So standardizing those botanicals, so you always get a same dose of your actives is a very important challenge that is much easier to address with a single ingredient pharmaceutical. Also, it is much harder to understand the actives and characterize the actives in a dietary supplement in a complex mixture of many molecules and understand their mode of action, because again, when you have a single molecule, it's easy to isolate, but then your effect, when your therapeutic effect, pharmacological effect, is based on a combination of different molecules which may even act on different targets, it's much harder to understand their mode of actions and identify the actives. And often we need to have this understanding to actually provide a better therapy for our patients. And of course, clinical trials are very, very important. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 clinical trials, just as for conventional drugs. And this is what is missing from the dietary supplement area, just because the market at this point is smaller, and each particular dietary supplement doesn't sell as well as a single ingredient prescription drug, and therefore companies who develop botanical supplements at this point are less incentivized to do clinical trials. This is very, very important to create mechanisms which will allow thorough clinical investigation of botanical dietary supplements of the future. Functional foods. Foods which not only provide nutrition and calories, but also deliver important bioactive molecules which can prevent or cure diseases, represent another very important frontier in the areas of plants and human health. We know that when we ingest plants, we also ingest many bioactive molecules, like polyphenols, antioxidants, resveratrol, like diallyls from onions, like sulforaphanes and other isothiocyanates from mustards and brassicaceae related plants, curcumin from turmeric, and many, many others. We know that those plants and their compounds in them can actually also be beneficial to our health. So this is a big challenge, is to actually convert foods into medicine. And this is clearly something that historically has been very well appreciated by many people, but not quite practiced. So to me, one of the biggest challenge in the area of plants and human health and plant research, and actually agricultural research, is to make plants thou medicine, as Hippocrates said more than 2,000 years ago. Agriculture evolved 10,000 years ago, and we were just growing plants to provide nutrition and provide enough calories so we can survive. Later on, yield and taste became important, but only with the discovery of vitamins in the early 20th century is then we started actually breeding and eating for better nutrition, for healthier nutrition. Health became a scientifically validated property of many foods. And we learned that a lot of vitamin deficiencies, for example, can be treated with those first functional foods, like scurvy and oranges, for example, which saved millions of lives. Vitamin deficiencies. And very recently, in the 90s, we're actually starting seeing more and more foods which are being sold with medical claims associated with them. You just see some pictures of the cereals which you can buy now in the United States. In the stores, they claim healthy hearts, cardiovascular health, lowering cholesterol, and so forth. You are actually now allowed to sell those foods legally in the stores, providing that you have substantial amount of clinical evidence which suggests that actually those claims are true. In the case of high fiber, for example, there is clinical evidence that those foods can lower the cholesterol, just as omega-3 fatty acids are known to help cardiovascular type patients. So now you're starting to see this whole new generation of legally sold foods which actually have health claims associated with them. This is a very important development. This is a great area for young scientists to do research. I would like to give you just one example of functional health promoting foods which we are working on in our laboratory. In the last 5 years, our goal was to develop lettuce varieties which have much higher levels of antioxidant polyphenols than traditional lettuces, which are mainly water and fiber, not really health promoting, nutritionally good for you, but not health promoting. So using non-GMO, non-recombinant approaches, which are based on tissue culture selection, we were able to produce several varieties of lettuces which have 50 times more antioxidants than regular lettuces. Those levels are above the antioxidant levels which we see in those famous berries like grape or blueberries, which are the gold standard for antioxidants, which can reduce the inflammation and therefore reduce the risk of metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease. Of course, this all needs to be validated clinically, and we don't have this data. We just have hopes. Nevertheless, because consumers are so interested in high antioxidant foods, our lettuces are now being grown by the farmers in the United States, and they're entering the stores with this super leaf lettuce label. And we just hope that this trend will continue and more science will be put behind those products to validate their pharmacological effects, not just nutricological effects. So I believe that the future of botanicals, future of plants and human health, doesn't necessarily lie in new drug discovery, in new conventional drug discovery, new conventional pharmaceuticals. But this future is in functional foods and consumer products with enhanced health promoting properties. So I really think that young scientists at this point and doctors and researchers should focus on the areas of functional foods, dietary supplements, also cosmetics and personal care, which we didn't touch here. But cosmetics is another very big area where botanicals play a prominent role, and in many cases are the functional, for example, anti-aging, anti-wrinkle, skin whitening type ingredients which are placed in many cosmetic products. And possibly, just possibly, plants can also be used to manufacture biologics, as recombinant antibodies, vaccines, which will be so important in the future of medicine. So when I think about the future of agriculture, I not only think about feeding the world, I think about keeping the world healthy and preventing and treating diseases. Moving from the commodity crops to value-added, health-focused, personalized nutrition. This is, I think, where we should concentrate our future efforts. And this is where plants can always be with us as sources of our health. Thank you so very much for your attention.